The aim of this unit is for us to find a common starting point where we develop an understanding of the current rise in worldwide interest in the notion of education for sustainable development. As has been noted in the previous presentation, the term sustainable development is a contested and complex concept in itself. Whilst progress has been slow, education for sustainable development remains an emerging agenda that is transforming the landscape of institutions around the world. And although the term sustainable development in itself is a multifaceted and contested concept, it does, however, represent an international call for a transformation of society and assumes that education is one of the major vehicles for achieving this. Here at the University of Leicester, we have developed a model of education for sustainable development to serve as a starting point to help you develop your understanding of the sort of education that is required to equip young people for a complex world today. This identifies ESD to consist of 6 core dimensions split across 2 wings. The first wing is concerned with the relational aspects, and the second wing is concerned with specific pedagogical approaches that best lend themselves to the sustainable development objectives. In all of this, the foundational ethical basis for sustainable development is framed as being the ethic of compassion and care, where an active concern for well-being is pursued. So whilst education for sustainable development is certainly about sound scientific investigation and critical scholarly inquiry, it is also concerned with values, education for citizenry and the modern world. This presentation will now briefly look at each of these dimensions in turn. The first core dimension of ESD is the biosphere dimension. This recognises the interconnectivity between the well-being of people and the natural environment. It acknowledges that human problems and ecological problems are inextricably intertwined and need to be understood in relation to one another. This dimension represents the coming together of 2 communities of practice, the first being the development education field, chiefly concerned with socio-economic and political aspects of human development, and issues of justice, peace and equity. The second community of practice is the environmental education field, concerned with issues of ecological literacy and environmental protection and conservation. The interface of these 2 fields through ESD is a crucial first step in recognising the complexity and interconnectivity of many of the multiple points of crisis that we are currently facing. These 2 slides from the environmentalist Mark Linus seek to highlight this fusion of human futures and environmental futures. They show a series of environmental problems that have escalated since the 1950s. And they present these alongside a series of graphs that illustrate patterns of human behaviour that similarly have increased in considerable magnitude since the 1950s. Mark Linus argued at a recent conference held by the Centre for Sustainable Futures at Plymouth University that the interconnectivity of these issues and their continued rise in scale represent in part a failure of academia in not giving priority to problems of living over problems of knowledge. They show we are living in unprecedented times and that our lives since 1950 are having an impact on the planet that no one in history has ever witnessed before. The temporal dimension recognises the interconnectivity of sustainable development issues across time. It involves a consideration of the links between the past, present and future, and the interdependent connections across generations. UNESCO argue that futures education needs to be given greater emphasis, particularly when one considers that there are more children in Africa today under the age of 15 than there are human beings in the United States. Similarly, there are more young people in China under the age of 15 who speak English than there are people in England. The future, UNESCO argues, belongs to the youth of the world. This is why it is so important that education gives attention to the temporal dimension supporting young people in considering their notions of probable and preferable futures and understanding the impact decisions made today could have on future generations and landscapes. This third dimension of sustainable development recognises the interconnectivity of the 21st century living across place. It involves learners in considering their local and global interdependency, realising that through the processes of globalisation, industrialisation and consumerism, our lives are caught up in a global network of mutuality. Consequently, a key aspect of ESD is helping young learners to recognise and navigate the responsibilities this global interdependence brings, as well as its opportunities. and to also identify how local actions can be taken in order to make a positive contribution to global problems. The first of the teaching and learning dimensions presents the need for learning spaces where sustainability issues can be considered critically through multiple perspectives. In so doing, learners are encouraged to deepen their reflexive awareness of their own worldviews and the impacts of their lifestyles. This dimension recognises that as well as a discipline-based understanding of current sustainability issues, their complexity, scale and interconnectedness requires that we are also able to engage with these problems from across different discipline specialisms. This slide shows the need for a transdisciplinary approach through reference to the development compass roads developed by Tide in Birmingham, UK. This illustrates that for any given sustainability issue, we need to be able to consider it from environmental, economic, social and political perspectives in order to understand the complexity of the issue more fully. The creative thinking dimension recognises the importance of educational spaces that nurture people's creative capacities, providing space to encourage learners in the process of generating and exploring what Robinson refers to as original ideas that are of value. What is commonly argued by scholars such as Bill Scott is that many sustainable development challenges that young people will face in their lifetimes we cannot currently conceive of or provide the secure knowledge base to equip them with. Instead, what it is argued is required are much more dynamic and interactive learning opportunities that build young people's capacity for adaptability and resilience in the face of unforeseeable futures, that exercises their creativity and takes seriously Albert Einstein's quotation that imagination is more important than knowledge. This final dimension involves the active process of learning through experience and reflection, where students engage in challenge-based learning approaches to sustainable development issues, learning through the cycle of conceptualizing, planning, acting and reflecting, and developing what Wayman refers to as informed, purposive action, and what we wish to refer to as the capacity to engage as critical creatives. Because of the need for people to collaborate together in order to secure more sustainable futures, a participative approach to ESD is needed where learners are actively engaged in the whole learning process, able to negotiate, consult and instigate. The Earth Education Organisation often quotes the strapline, "From the heart, through the head and with the hands." It is this holistic vision of education, touching upon the values, knowledge and skills of students, that this model here frames as essential for ESD.